Good morning, everybody. Richmond Chamber of Commerce are delighted once again to welcome Richmond Council, Director of Resources Fenella Merry, and Assistant Director of Resources Graham Russell to present to us on grants on predominantly the finances they do every year. So the Richmond Council finances, as well as business rates, just to inform businesses as to the precise mechanism and so forth for how business rates are managed. It's really important we all understand that. So over to Fenella, Director of Resources for Richmond Council. Thank you for coming along.
Okay, so thank you very much, Anne. Thank you for organising this session.
Pleasure.
Just to clarify, I'm Fenella Merry, I'm Director of Resources. I've got a handful of slides that I'm going to go through, not too long, hopefully. And also on the call, we've got Graham Russell, who is the expert on all things business rates. And I'm sure he's got lots of things that will resonate with some of you. So I'll go through my slides very quickly and then move on to Graham. So why we're here, actually, so we're currently, as a council, setting our budgets and our council tax for the upcoming financial year. And as part of that process, we have to consult with business ratepayers. It's a statutory duty to consult. So these are the budgets and the council tax proposals that will be going to the next full council meeting next month for approval. So a very high-level overview of the council's finances. We currently spend around £300 million a year in revenue. That excludes schools because they're funded from a slightly different pot. And the slide shows that the majority of our spend is actually within adult social care and children's services. So about 60% of our spend is on social care. And that's something that we'll come back to. I'll come back to you later on because that's a significant financial challenge for the council. Then we have the other services that we fund, such as housing, homelessness prevention, temporary accommodation, environment and community services. So all the things like leisure centres, libraries, parks, street cleaning, waste collection, recycling, traffic and transport. And then we have some central services, which includes economic development, which I think is a service that, well, hopefully some of you will have come across, but certainly Anne, in her role, will have dealt with the economic development team quite closely. And the majority of our services are funded by council tax. About £150 million worth of council tax is collected each year in Richmond. We do get some government grants. We get less than we used to get in the past, and we have customer client receipts, which are effectively our residents or customers paying for the services that they are choosing to use. So parking, leisure centres, libraries, those kind of things. And then obviously very relevant to this forum, we have business rates. So about 9% of our funding comes from the business rates that we collect from businesses in the borough. We actually collect business rates and have to pay some of that into the national pot each year. But it's an important part of our income sources. We also, in addition to the revenue costs, we also have a 3-year capital programme investment in the borough, which is over £100 million at the moment. So the majority of that is on transport related schemes, so highways, public realm, street lighting, LED replacements. We've also got a large capital programme in housing at the moment because we've got a £12 million property acquisition programme that we're just about to launch. And education, we have significant investment in our schools, and we have some big property schemes in the pipeline, which are showing in finance and policy. So Twickenham Riverside, LRA Hall, and some pretty big redevelopment pieces going on. And the majority of that capital programme is actually funded from borrowing. So Richmond has a borrowing requirement each year, which obviously we have to balance the need and the desire to invest with the long-term cost of borrowing to fund that investment. A little bit about where we are. So looking back a year to 2021, so the last financial year, which was the first year of COVID in full, actually at the end of the year, we had a very quite a healthy one-off underspend, which was caused by COVID actually, because a lot of our services redirected their efforts to the pandemic response, and so weren't spending in the way that they would usually spend. And the government actually covered the cost of COVID in full. So the council didn't end up paying for any of the cost of COVID last year. We also had a one-off agreement for quite a large schools funding shortfall, which was good news. And therefore, at the end of last year, we were able to top up reserves, obviously on a one-off basis, we think, but very helpful to have that one-off good news. Just a summary of where COVID has impacted on the council. So obviously 2 financial years have been affected, and you'll see there that the level of government support has been significant. We've had over £200 million worth of cost recovery and grant payments out over the past 2 years. These are just Richmond's figures. The majority of the spend that the government has given us has been on business related grants and business rate reliefs. And then we've also had our own COVID costs and lost income on the back of COVID. And that to date, that has all been covered by the government. Looking forward to 22-23, so this is the financial year that we're about to set the budgets for. We've got some significant budget pressures on the horizon, largely in adults and children's social care, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the largest part of our revenue spend each year. A significant increase in the budget required, we think, partly due to demand increase, which is something in Richmond because of the cohort of residents and demographics is something that we've always had on the horizon, but also significant increases at the moment in the request for mental health services and significant costs relating to hospital discharges, where certainly over the past 2 years, the impact of COVID has really had a significant impact on the number of hospital discharges and ultimately the cost of those packages post-hospital discharge that are picked up by the clients have to be picked up by councils. And then overall, there's a real problem at the moment with the care market. So social care is really in a very difficult position. A number of factors from staff recruitment and retention issues. Obviously, residential care and home care is suffering still with COVID and the controls that they've had to put in place to reduce the spread. Inflation is a big pressure in the care market as well, so we're really seeing a lot of pressure in that area. Homelessness demand is on the rise, partly as a result of the government's push to bring every rough sleeper in during COVID, which is very successful. We're left with the legacy of that is we do have an increase in homelessness demand. And also, as you'd expect, inflation is a big pressure at the moment, higher than we've ever had to, or certainly recently had to budget for. So that's definitely something that will cause us pressure in the next year. And then also the impact of COVID. We've still got reduced levels of income, particularly around our leisure services, where we haven't recovered to pre-pandemic levels of income, and we're not sure if and when that position will recover. We've also got the impact of COVID overall in that the government has, as I said, covered the net cost of COVID for the past 2 years in full, but we don't have a sense of whether or not that will continue into the next year. Despite the pressures, we have got investment in the budget. We've planned for additional investment in youth services, homelessness prevention. We've got a £12 million property acquisition programme planned where we will be purchasing properties in the borough to rent out to those in need of social housing. We've got quite a big programme of public realm improvement, so improving the look and feel of the borough, town centres, parks, high streets. We've got a significant ongoing investment to our climate emergency strategy, so net zero by 2030, and we've really put a lot of money into that already, and that continues. We've also got additional investment planned in community safety, so making our town centres safer, improving street lighting, a programme of works around that. And then a couple of extras on there, an increase in tourism budgets to see if we can help businesses with the bounce back from COVID. And then obviously this year only, we've got some investment in the Platinum Jubilee. We've also got some budget efficiencies. So we've got pressures and investments, but we've also got things in the pipeline that we have done already and are doing to improve our financial position. So we're reviewing our office estate, making sure we're getting the best use and the best value out of the buildings that we own and operate. Obviously that has changed over the past 2 years as we've had fewer people working in the office at any one time. So we're going to look at that and see whether that's something that we can exploit going forward to reduce our office estate costs. We've got significant investment around IT, moving to the cloud, reducing our use of energy. So whilst energy prices are on the rise, we are working hard to reduce how much energy we use. So LED lighting across all the street lighting is a significant investment, in particular in that, so reducing how much we use. And as always, procurement and contract savings, which we're trying to deliver on the renewal of contracts, and holding down inflation, so trying to limit the impact of inflation on our budgets where we can. And then a new one over the past couple of years has been really trying to exploit the use of data analytics, so understanding the data that we hold, what it's telling us about the services that we run and how we can run them more efficiently. So we are doing things to reduce the council's costs as much as we can. So finally, on to what our proposals are for the coming year's budget. The budget includes the investments and the pressures that we just spoke about, and it includes a proposal to increase Richmond's council tax by 1.94%. That's lower than the maximum that we're allowed to increase it by. The government would allow a 2.99% increase. We are increasing 1% for adult social care, which is a precept that is specifically related to adult social care. And hopefully from the slides I've already covered, you'll understand why we think that's necessary. And then the general increase, so non-social care specific, we're taking half of the increase that we would be allowed to take. This is because, linking again back to the COVID position for the last financial year, some of the reserve gain that we had last year, we are going to recycle basically to help residents with the cost of living. So we're able to apply a lower than maximum increase by using some of those reserves that built up last year. And then just to say, the Mayor of London's increase, separate to Richmond Council's increase, he's putting his council tax share up by 8.8%. largely as a result of the financial struggles of Transport for London and also investment in the police. So overall, the council tax proposals for next year would see, with the Richmond element and the Mayor's element, would be a 3.2% increase in council tax. Finally, a couple of slides on the economic outlook and what this means for businesses. So looking forward, we need to understand more about COVID and the net cost of COVID ongoing, whether or not that will continue to have an impact on the council's finances and whether or not the government will fund any of that. We've also got, and I'm sure you've heard this phrase, the levelling up agenda, where the government is keen to level up the finances across the country, and as you would expect, that is probably going to be bad news for areas like the southeast of England, and particularly I would have thought for boroughs like Richmond. We've also got known the government is planning to change the way it distributes its funding across the country anyway, and between councils, even without the levelling up agenda. And again, I think we could only think that that's bad news for Richmond. We've got demographic pressures, as I said, with the the cohort of residents in Richmond, and a population that is very fortunate to be ageing, but that does come with additional cost pressures, and finally inflation. So the final slide from me, just a recap on our work with businesses. So we have a very active economic development team in the council. Some of you hopefully will have worked with or met the EDO team. I know Anne will have definitely worked closely with them over the past couple of years. They're quite positive about the bounce back from COVID. Richmond is bouncing back relatively better than other areas of London. EDO and the economic development team will continue to support businesses where they can, including the borough's bids. We've got a very big public realm and town centre improvement programme. So £2 million of specific funding was identified in the summer to target town centre areas to make them look better, and that will be spent over the next 12 months. We've got some programmes like the Phoenix Enterprise Programme, which some of you may have been involved in. We've had some really good numbers on that, and we've managed to help an awful lot of existing and new businesses through that programme. We have a brand new employment and skills strategy, which concentrates on working with key partners and tackling inequalities in the job market, supporting local businesses to hire local talent. And alongside that, we've got the Work Match service, which is a very targeted service which helps residents to look for work and secure employment in the borough by working with local businesses. And then finally, we have a programme of trying to extend the borough's affordable workspace. We've got some government funding for that, and we are looking at options now to increase the availability of affordable workspace, which we think on the back of what's happened over the past 2 years, that's something that we definitely need to be investing in. That's all my slides, so I will stop sharing my screen and I will hand over to Graham, who will be able to speak to you about business grants and the past couple of years. Graham.
Thanks, Fenella. Good morning, everybody. So as Fenella said, I'm Graham Russell. I'm the Assistant Director of Resources. I'm responsible, as well as for business rates, for collection of council tax, parking fines. So as you can imagine, I'm very popular around the borough. But that's not the reason my picture is a bit shady. I'm not trying to hide my identity. It's just I have a spectacularly bad setup with a south-facing window in my son's old bedroom, which is where I work from at the moment. So apologies for that. Just a little bit of history. I joined Richmond Council in 1986, which is an awful long time ago, just before the last great storm that some of you probably remember in 1987. And I've done various roles with the council since then, as you can imagine, and focusing on revenues and benefits for the last 15 years or so. So the last 2 years have been unprecedented in my career, probably your experience too, not least because with business rates, we've had to adopt the novel concept of paying businesses rather than collecting money from businesses, which has been something we have not really done over the years. In total, we've paid out about £82 million in grants over that period, and that's made up of over 10,000 separate payments. And on top of that, we've applied £77 million worth of mostly retail, hospitality and leisure reliefs to individual business accounts. You're probably aware that just before Christmas, the government announced 3 further schemes. We were hoping in the council that was it with all these schemes, because they've been quite stressful to get the money out, and I can imagine not quite to the levels of stress that some of the business owners have been feeling, but it was quite difficult getting the money out quickly to people. But they announced 3 further schemes, which cheered us up. The first of those was the Natalie titled Omicron Hospitality and Leisure Grant, and that was money provided to local councils specifically to fund hospitality, leisure and accommodation businesses in recognition of the fact that the rise of the Omicron variant was affecting certain businesses quite badly. The benefits available under that scheme are, if your rateable value is less than 15,000, you get a grant of £2,667. Between 15 and 51, you get 4,000, and over 51, you get a grant of £6,000. Now, we believe there are just under 500 eligible businesses in the borough. 374 of those have applied. That's 77% of the total. And we've paid out 336 grants, totaling £1.2 million so far. Now, that money needs to be paid out by the 31st of March, or the council will lose it and will not be able to pay out after that date. So all eligible businesses have been written to, and if you've had a letter and not applied, you should have had a reminder as well. So if you had one of those, please apply, because otherwise you do run the risk of missing out on that grant. The second grant they announced was an addition to the additional restrictions grant. They've been topping that grant up on a number of occasions over the last 2 years. This is money that started off being given to local councils to run their own discretionary schemes to try and pick up some of the businesses that weren't able to benefit from the government's mandatory schemes over that period. We got £500,000 in this last tranche, and we decided to pay a further top up to previous recipients of ARG grants. We couldn't really think of any reason to change the eligibility on this occasion, and that money was paid out last week, so there's no application available for that, and no further money on that particular one. The last scheme is probably the most complex. This is called the COVID Additional Relief Fund. This was born out of complaints from many businesses who were unable to access government support at the start of the pandemic, but who still felt they were badly affected, and they put in material change of circumstances claims to try and get their rateable values reduced. Now, the government took an age to decide how to deal with this, but in the end, they passed a law to prevent COVID being used as a material change of circumstance. And instead, they gave money to local authorities to set up their own discretionary schemes to try and target support on some of these businesses. Richmond was allocated just over £5 million. Now, that allocation was based on a government estimate of how badly various sectors of the economy had been affected, and they tried to then convert that to how badly businesses in each individual borough had been affected, and they came up with the amount of money that they've given us. Now, the problem with their methodology is it's very, very high level, and it doesn't actually work at a local level. So they used what we call SIC codes, Standard Industrial Classification Codes, which are held on the VOA lists. And lots of those don't really reflect the business that's going on inside the buildings. So we are still working on the best way to try and distribute those funds. When we do get round to that, we'll obviously let the chamber know, and they'll advertise it for us, and it'll be on the website. The money that comes will be via a relief. It's not a grant, this particular one, and it will only apply to your 21-22 rates liability. So unfortunately, I can't give you a lot more detail on that at the moment, but so we are working on it, and will be publicised as soon as possible. Looking forward, the 22-23 business rate multipliers have been frozen, so they'll stay the same at 49.9p for under 51,000 rateable values, and 51.2p standard rate. Retail, hospitality and leisure relief also continues, but at a rate of 50%. That's worth £27 million next year. But the government has made some slight changes to the eligibility for that. So estate and letting agents, employment agencies and betting shops will not be eligible for that particular relief. The final thing I'd like to talk about is a technical consultation which is going on at the moment, which has some repercussions for businesses. The VOA is looking to move to a system of 3 yearly valuations. You'll probably be aware it's supposed to be, I think, 5 yearly. Normally ends up being 7 or 8 years because it's always too difficult to do because of the impact it has on various businesses. But they're looking to move to 3 yearly valuations in order to keep the business rate system much more in line with what's actually happening on the ground. What that will require It will be regular updates from businesses as to any improvements or changes in leasing arrangements and so on. And the government is looking to impose a statutory duty to force businesses to do that. The consultation document is saying that they're trying to keep the process as simple as possible. It will be online. It shouldn't take too long to do, but it will be an additional burden for businesses to keep that up to date. The government would say that the offset of that is that the business rates bills will be much more accurate. Whether that's the same view that the businesses will have remains to be seen. A couple of other things in that technical consultation. They're looking to introduce a new improvement relief, whereby if you invest money to improve your business, some of that may be offset by rate relief. And similarly, there'll be relief for investment in green plant and machinery, which is specifically related to on-site generation of energy. And finally, there's some very minor technical changes about the way in which the council can award small business relief. So the main part of that, which will impact on the businesses, as I say, will be the new requirements for you to update the VOA as to any changes in your situation. What I'd say finally is lots has happened in the last 2 years, and once the CARF is out of the way, the final relief scheme, we should be sort of returning to business as usual for business rates, which will unfortunately mean that I'll have to collect money from you rather than paying it to you. If you do have issues with the bills, I mean, we stopped recovery processes at the start of the pandemic, recognising that many businesses were in trouble. We've restarted them now. We do need to collect that money, as Fenella said. It funds important services within the borough. I would say though is if you have got issues, please engage with the business rates team. We can be more flexible now than we used to be in terms of payment arrangements. You know, recognising the difficulties that businesses have faced over the last 2 years, and we do really advise people to get in touch early if there are issues. That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening, and I'm sure Fenella and I will be very pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.